Spider-Man is likely the most popular and beloved of all Marvel characters. He has some of the best comics, the best video games, and the best movies. However, as far as that last part goes, it wasn't exactly easy sailing to get Spider-Man on the big screen. Plenty of people threw their own versions of Spider-Man in the ring throughout the 80s and 90s, just trying to get their own version of the movie realized. However, one name that definitely stands out to me is David Fincher. So, what if his version happened? What if somehow Sony decided to go with Fincher's version over Sam Raimi's? Simply put, what if David Fincher directed Spider-Man? After a number of well-known directors like James Cameron, Michael Bay, Chris Columbus, and Barry Sonnenfeld were considered for the director's chair, David Fincher decided to offer his own take on the beloved character as well. Fincher was best known at the time for Alien 3, 7, and Fight Club. The latter two are considered absolute masterpieces of cinema, while the former is considered one of the biggest missed opportunities in all of cinema. Sorry, not sorry. Now, for the cast of this movie, Fincher was possibly considering Edward Norton in the role of Spider-Man, although this might have been untrue considering how much Fincher and Norton reportedly clashed with each other while filming Fight Club, besides the fact that Norton was 30 at the time, and he definitely looked too old to be a teenager, which does suggest that he might have been going for an older version of the Spider-Man character. So now the plot apparently would have skipped over the origin story of Spider-Man, summing it up in a 10-minute one-shot opening sequence that Fincher described would have been operatic. Think like the Incredible Hulk or Watchmen openings. Now this would have featured Peter being picked on, bitten by the spider, losing Uncle Ben, becoming Spider-Man, and getting broken up with by Mary Jane, possibly for not being there for her as often as she needs him to be. Now Peter, at the proper beginning of the movie, would still be feeling this hole that people like Uncle Ben and Mary Jane left behind. And that's when he'd meet Gwen Stacy. She would become the absolute light of his life, but he'd be afraid of getting close to her for fear of her getting hurt. And unfortunately, his worst fears would come true, because Green Goblin was going to have killed Gwen before the movie's end, hardening Peter into losing himself as Peter Parker, but finding himself again as Spider-Man. The people's love for their hero would really be the only thing helping him get through the day anymore. Now, Sony were said to have really hated this script. They found it to be way too dark and depressing for a Spider-Man movie, and they envisioned something that would be more fun for the family, more easy to market. And Fincher himself has admitted that he really wasn't a fan of the campy Spider-Man stuff, and said that he in particular was not a fan of his origin story, believing it to just be way too silly to take seriously. He said that he didn't even want to film it, as it would keep him up at night. He wanted to do what he's done in a lot of his movies. He wanted to explore an isolated character going through emotional and or physical turmoil day after day. Fincher wanted to build up a Spider-Man that's lost everything he cares about and leans on the Spider-Man identity as like a crutch. So that was David Fincher's Spider-Man. So what do I think of it? I have mixed feelings on it, okay? I don't think that it sounds all bad. My major criticism of it is it does sound a little too bleak. Like, I'm not even against the idea of a gritty Spider-Man movie. Like, a lot of people hated the first Amazing Spider-Man because it was basically Spider-Man's Dark Knight, and people didn't really want a dark Spider-Man movie. But, you know what? I actually kind of liked the fact that it was trying to be grittier. It tried to go in a different direction tonally than the Raimi movies, and I kind of appreciated that. And honestly, I don't even think that, this version sounds that bad. But it would have been the first movie, the first Spider-Man movie. And, like, if this was the Spider-Man movie we got after, 30 years of getting the same kind of Spider-Man movies, this would probably be a really refreshing movie. But as the first ever, major Spider-Man movie, because there have been, the TV ones, but, this would be a lot of people's first impression of him. And it's not a good idea, in my opinion, for a first impression movie. It'd be like if they did Man of Steel as like the first ever Superman movie instead of Superman the movie, if that makes sense. It would be fine, but like you can't help but feel like that's not the right first movie for a superhero on the big screen. You know what I mean? Like if you ask me, I feel like most superheroes should have a more fun first movie and then go into a grittier version later. It worked great for Batman, and it worked, mostly good for Superman. As I said, I didn't even think it was that bad for Spider-Man. But for Spider-Man's first movie to be this dark, it just doesn't sound right to me. It sounds overly gritty, and I don't even hate the idea. I mean, they pulled off Gwen Stacy's deaths really, really well, actually, in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Uncle Ben's death, I think, works in both versions. Definitely more in the Raimi version, in my opinion. But, so these are not bad ideas. I even like the idea of Mary Jane breaking up with him. And you know what? Even though I love Spider-Man's origin, I don't even hate the idea of them skipping over it because it worked wonders in like The Incredible Hulk, which also had Edward Norton, as well as Watchmen. It worked really well in explaining a bunch of stuff to get all the origin stuff out of the way and get right to the meat of the story. Would I have preferred that? No, but I don't think it would be impossible to do it well. And the reason I'm being soft on this is because, like it or not, David Fincher is a masterful director. Besides Alien 3, I mean, every single one of his movies, I think everybody can consider is at least good, if not great. So I'm not even saying this would be a bad movie. I think it would actually be a very good movie. It doesn't sound right for Spider-Man. He doesn't sound like a good fit for this character as a director. Like if he was doing like a Batman movie, he would be perfect for a Batman movie. But Spider-Man, I mean, think about it. Imagine hiring a guy who openly admits he thinks Spider-Man's origin is kind of stupid. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way, but, I like his origin. I think a lot of people do. And I don't know, to hear that a director doesn't want to do the origin because he thinks it's stupid, it just doesn't sound like he really knows what the character is all about. Maybe he does. Maybe he knows, and that's just his opinion on the origin alone. I don't know. But it doesn't sound like the best of fits to me, that's all. And honestly, as I said, I don't think it's that bad of an idea. I like the idea of Mary Jane breaking up with Peter. I don't think that's a bad idea. But it's not something I think should be done in like the first 10 minutes, especially because this would have been the first movie. Like, man, I feel like I've said this a lot, but like this sounds like it would be a good like third or fourth Spider-Man movie, like instead of the first. Like, imagine Edward Norton started playing Spider-Man when he was in his late teens or early 20s. Then he goes through like two or three movies with Mary Jane. Then in the fourth movie, she breaks up with him because she can't handle it anymore. So then he gets together with Gwen, and then like in Spider-Man 5 or 6, she gets killed by the Green Goblin. That sounds more fleshed out, doesn't it? Like, it would build things up more so you actually give a shit. And I'm not saying that you wouldn't have given a shit completely in this version, but I just think it's better with build-up, Like, you can't, have him get broken up with by Mary Jane, so fast and make us care, in my opinion. And I mean, opening credit sequences can do a lot. I actually don't even mind the idea of this movie having a 10-minute opening credit sequence to explain the origin and get right to the meat. And sometimes 10-minute openings are great. Like, Up. The first 10 minutes of Up are arguably the best part of that movie. But for Spider-Man, his origin is just so complex. I feel like 10 minutes isn't doing it justice. That's just my opinion, though. So overall, I don't think this movie would be bad at all. David Fincher is a consistently amazing director, no pun intended, and Edward Norton is a fantastic actor. And if they want to do an older Spider-Man that's just gotten beaten down by tragedies, that would actually be a really good movie. But it wouldn't be a good first movie. And in my opinion, this is a movie that could be made like 10 years from now, like when we're tired of seeing the same kind of Spider-Man, then that would be a good time. But like, I don't think people would be ready for a movie like this in the 90s. I don't think it would have done that well, and at least financially. And I don't think that Sony would have been making the right decision if they stuck with it. I think in the end, Sony made the absolute perfect decision when they went with Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire. I think that was, as good as they could have done. And they knocked knocked it out of the park. In my opinion, Tobey Maguire is still the best Spider-Man, and Sam Raimi is still the best Spider-Man director. And so, yeah, do I think David Fincher and Edward Norton could do a good Spider-Man movie together? Of course they could. They're both amazing. God damn, I'm not trying to make that pun, I swear. But I don't think that the world was ready for it. And I don't think it would have made a good first Spider-Man movie. And even if it wasn't, I still think it's overly bleak and could have used some more build-up to build up some of the more tragic moments of his character history, if that makes sense. But either way, guys, let me know in the comments down below what you think of David Fincher's Spider-Man. How would you have felt if David Fincher's Spider-Man had been the first ever Spider-Man instead of the Sam Raimi one? How would you have felt if Edward Norton played Spider-Man? Or if they summed up his origin in the first 10 minutes? Or if they killed Gwen in the first movie? I want to hear all about it in the comments down below. Also, give me more what if recommendations in the comments down below. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with all of your friends and all your various social media platforms. And I'll see all of you in the next video.